This game is an example of an unusual opening, the Grob G4, and traps associated with it. I actually played it as white and won online with this at the internet a few years ago with that. So the G4 is the Grob. It's a tricky opening with this if you know what you're doing, but don't get trapped with losing very much with this. Black will control the center with D5, and then the idea is play the bishop to G2, encountering the bishop, attacking the center with this, but giving up a pawn. So now that bishop takes the pawn with this, I've got to try to get it back. So I play C4. Now, if something happens like that, I can grab the pawn on B7 and grab the rook. So instead, I want to develop quickly queen to B3, threatening to take the pawn on B7 that way. So this is the line that we're looking for with this. Black is holding in the center with E6. He could have played C6 or taken the pawn, or I could have done that. He develops the knight, not worried about this pawn on here with this. I would take normally with this, and then he could develop and try to trap my queen or whatever. But I want to get a quick development, but I also want to control the center. I'm a pawn down, and I need to develop quick. So my pawn takes his center pawn on D5, and then he takes, and then I get the pawn back with bishop to takes at D5. So I have a queen and bishop on this with that. Now at this point, black could have played knight D4 attacking the queen, and I'd probably have to move the queen, something like that, not losing it with that. But he develops his bishop to D6. That's strong enough with this. And now I probably can take the pawn safely, but I thought maybe I could sacrifice the bishop, get the king out, and trap the king with this. So I played bishop takes at f7 check with this. Now if he takes here, I can take the pawn, and that's safe with this. But if he moves in the corner like this, I got one more way of moving that bishop and taking the knight. I could have been safe in playing the bishop back to d5, but I decided to take the knight. And then he takes, he can't take it with the king because of the queen. And now I can take this pawn with this. So if we look at it, I got development, I got pieces out, queen's out there and threatening on the queen side. Now black, he can try to maneuver like in the center, something like this. And I would probably look at a pin with queen to b5 and try to hold this pawn because he was putting pressure on that down here. So instead, what happened was that he brings his knight to e5, and I said, well, that's good. I can attack in the center with the pawn to d4 and help get my bishop out, and I need to develop my knight as well. So at this point, the knight's got to move. So he's got three possibilities or three candidate moves. He can probably try the knight to d7, and I can develop the knight c3. That's one idea. He can play knight to f7. I can get the queen over to e4. But what was played was knight to g6. That gives me a chance to develop my other knight, knight to c3. At this point with this, black could probably play rook to b8, and I can win the pawn with that move with that. Or maybe he wants to try to trade off the queens, in which case once the pawns and queens is traded off, I can play f3 and kick back the bishop. But he brought his king up to f7 with this, and I said, well, I need to kick back that bishop here on g4, or I developed the knight like that. But my decision was to push the pawn to h3 and kick back that bishop with this. And now here's where he makes his mistake. He pushes his bishop to h5, not realizing it's not protected in a few moves with this. He should have tried something like rook to b8, and then I get my queen attacking on the king side, and that's safe. Or he could bring the bishop all the way back to e6, in which I can check him. And then if he wants to trade off, I develop my knight. And then if he exchanges, my knight goes to g5, forking the king and queen. He would move, I would get his queen, and we get a game like that. He also could have tried queen to c8 and tried to trade off. I would ignore it, try to check him with this. His bishop would go to e6. I would check him again, let him move, and then push the pawn to d5 for control of the center. But if we go back to see what he played, let's see why that's a trap and no good. Once this move is made with this, white just plays queen to d5 check. Wherever the king goes, queen takes bishop, and he's down a piece, and he resigns. So it's a grab opening, unusual opening, trappy. Both sides have to watch out for the game at this, and one would have to know the opening real well without falling into any traps against g4.